Here's what no one tells you about a dead garden.
No sun,
It's not the
no
sun.
water. How am I
It's not
supposed
the
to
water.
grow and...
It's not even the soil nutrients. The real killer is invisible.
This is
It's
a
happening
cross-section
2
of
feet
soil.
beneath your feet
The
right
topsoil
now,
is rich in organic.
and it has nothing to do with anything you can see on the surface. Look at your garden after a heavy rain. The top layer looks soaked, maybe even waterlogged. But dig down 6, 8, 10 inches into clay-heavy soil,
What is that?
and you'll find
No,
something that
stay
should
back.
terrify every gardener.
Help!
A gray, airless, suffocating void where roots are literally drowning in their own environment.
The roots absorb water
Roots
and
don't
nutrients
just
from the
drink
soil.
water,
They transport them up to
breathe.
the stem.
And when clay soil compacts after rain, it seals off every microscopic air channel, like a coffin lid snapping shut. The roots sit there starved of oxygen, and they begin to rot. Your plant looks fine from the top for a few days, maybe a week. Then it just gives up. You think you did something wrong. You didn't. You were just never given the right information. Now, here's the part that should make you angry. The solution to this problem has existed for over 2,000 years. It costs exactly $0. And all it requires is something you are about to throw in the recycling bin. An empty plastic bottle. Not a fancy aerator. Not a $400 soil conditioning machine. A bottle buried upside down. And what it does to the invisible world beneath your garden is something the fertilizer industry has spent decades making sure you never figure out on your own. Let's talk about who benefits from you not knowing this. The global soil amendment and conditioner market was valued at $8.5 billion in 2022, according to Grandview Research, and it is projected to grow at 5.2% annually through 2030. That number, $8.5 billion, exists almost entirely because gardeners and small farmers believe that healthy soil requires purchased intervention. Aerators, tillers, conditioners, synthetic drainage systems. Walk into any garden center, and you'll find a wall of products specifically designed to solve the exact problem we're talking about today. Compacted, oxygen-starved clay soil. The cheapest mechanical core aerator starts at $180. A mid-range electric model runs $400 to $600. And the liquid soil conditioners, the ones that promise to break up clay, will cost you $30 to $80 per treatment per season indefinitely. Compare that to the method in this video. 3 empty plastic bottles and 10 minutes of your time. $0. That's not a typo. Now, here's what makes this a deliberate blind spot, rather than just an oversight. Soil aeration research has been published in peer-reviewed journals since at least the 1970s. The physics behind passive air movement through narrow chambers, the exact principle this technique exploits, is taught in every first-year engineering program. It is not obscure science, but obscure science doesn't generate $8.5 billion in annual revenue. Dependency does. And an industry that size has every incentive to keep the conversation focused on products, not principles. This is not about conspiracy. This is about market logic. When a solution is free, it doesn't get a marketing budget. It doesn't get shelf space. It doesn't get recommended by the sponsored content you see in your feed. The $8.5 billion industry doesn't suppress this knowledge with malice. It simply drowns it out with money. And the knowledge that got drowned out is older than any corporation on Earth. Around 400 BCE, Roman agricultural engineers were already solving this exact problem. They called it the subsoilum challenge. The invisible layer of compacted earth beneath the workable topsoil that strangled root systems and turned productive farmland into waterlogged waste after seasonal rains. Their solution was elegant and entirely passive. Terracotta pipes, unglazed and porous, buried vertically and at angles through the compacted layer, creating what they knew as spiritus terra, the breath of the earth. No machinery, no chemical intervention, just physics and clay cylinders doing what hollow chambers have always done, moving air. The technique migrated north with Roman expansion and was refined by English farmers in the 18th century into what became known as tile drainage, using fired clay pipes laid in networks beneath heavy agricultural fields across Yorkshire and the Midlands. By 1850, over 3 million acres of British farmland had been transformed, using variations of this buried pipe aeration principle documented extensively by the Royal Agricultural Society of England. Fields that had flooded annually for generations became consistently productive within 2 to 3 growing seasons. The knowledge was practical, proven, and widespread. Then, the 20th century arrived. Mechanized agriculture scaled up. Chemical fertilizers promised faster results. Tractors made deep tillage possible. And an ancient understanding of soil as a breathing living system was quietly replaced by a model of soil as a substrate, something inert that you inject nutrients into, rather than something alive that you have a relationship with. The buried pipe knowledge didn't disappear entirely. It survived in the margins in small farming communities, in the notebooks of soil scientists who never got research grants from agrochemical companies. And eventually, it found its way to people standing in their backyards holding an empty milk jug and wondering if this could actually work. It does, and the physics behind why it works is more elegant than anything a $400 machine can replicate. Let's get into the actual mechanism because this is where the elegant part lives. Every plant root system requires oxygen concentrations between 10% and 21% in the surrounding soil air to maintain healthy aerobic respiration. That's not a guideline. That's a biological requirement, documented across decades of root physiology research, including studies published by the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources as recently as 2018. When oxygen drops below 10%, root metabolism slows. Below 5%, roots begin producing ethanol as a byproduct of anaerobic respiration. The same chemical process that happens in a sealed bottle of fermenting liquid. That ethanol accumulates in root tissue and begins to destroy cell walls from the inside. This is what root rot actually is, at the biochemical level. Not a fungal problem first, an oxygen problem first, and then a fungal problem second. Because anaerobic soil conditions also happen to be the perfect breeding environment for Phytophthora and Pythium, the 2 fungal genera responsible for the majority of root rot cases in home gardens worldwide. Now here is where clay becomes the villain at the microscopic level. Clay soil is composed of particles smaller than 0.002 millimeters, so small that when wet, they pack together with almost zero space between them. A healthy loam soil maintains roughly 25% of its volume as air-filled pore space even after rain. Saturated clay soil drops to somewhere between 2% and 5% air volume. That's the difference between a root system that breathes and one that suffocates inside what is functionally a sealed container made of earth. Standard surface tillage, the thing every gardening guide tells you to do, breaks up the top 2 to 4 inches of soil. Root systems of established plants and most vegetables extend 6 to 18 inches deep. You are aerating the ceiling of the room while the room itself remains airless. It is one of the most well-intentioned and consistently ineffective interventions in home gardening. So what does a buried plastic bottle actually do that changes this equation? The answer lives in a principle that Daniel Bernoulli formalized in 1738. though the physics itself is as old as wind. When moving air passed across a narrow opening, the mouth of a bottle sitting just above the soil surface, it creates a zone of lower pressure directly above that opening, relative to the air inside the buried chamber below. That pressure differential pulls stale CO2 heavy air up from the soil column and draws fresh oxygen-rich air down to replace it. The narrower the opening relative to the chamber volume, the more pronounced the effect. A standard 1.5-liter plastic bottle buried with its base removed and its neck exposed at surface level creates a passive air exchange cycle every time wind moves across your garden. No power source, no moving parts, no maintenance, just Bernoulli's principle, working 24 hours a day, 2 feet below everything that matters to your roots. The depth penetration is the part that genuinely surprises people, because you are not aerating just the immediate cavity of the bottle. The pressure differential creates a draw effect through the surrounding soil matrix, pulling gas exchange through interconnected pore spaces in a radius of roughly 8 to 14 inches around each buried unit, depending on soil density. 3 bottles properly spaced can influence the soil atmosphere across a root zone that no hand tiller or surface aerator could ever meaningfully reach. And that's only the half of what this system does, because there's a second mechanism operating simultaneously. One that is biological rather than physical, and arguably even more powerful over time. The second mechanism is alive, literally. Earthworms are among the most effective soil engineers on the planet, and they are profoundly responsive to 2 things: organic material as a food source, and oxygen gradients that tell them where conditions are favorable. Under normal compacted clay conditions, earthworm populations migrate away from the anaerobic zone and concentrate near the surface, which means the deep compaction layer, the exact layer destroying your root system, goes completely unworked. No tunnels, no channels, no biological drilling of any kind through the zone that matters most. Here is where the organic material you drop into the bottle changes everything. Coffee grounds, banana peels, crushed eggshells, the kind of kitchen scraps most people throw away, placed inside the buried bottle, create a localized decomposition event at depth. The microbial activity generating that decomposition produces CO2 and heat signatures that earthworms detect and follow downward through whatever navigable pore space already exists. Once they arrive at the food source, they begin feeding. And an earthworm feeding at depth is an earthworm tunneling at depth constantly. A single earthworm produces roughly 11 pounds of castings per year and maintains tunnel networks that can extend 3 to 6 feet vertically. A healthy earthworm population, which this system actively cultivates by giving them both a food source and an oxygenated corridor to reach it, can increase soil macroporosity by up to 40%. According to research published by Cornell University's Department of Soil and Crop Sciences in 2019, that is not surface porosity. That is deep structural change in the clay layer itself, accomplished by biology rather than machinery, sustained and self-reinforcing. Over every growing season you maintain the system. This is the moment where most people watching this need to make a small but important mental shift. You are not a gardener who waters and waits. You are a subsurface systems engineer who designs conditions and lets physics and biology execute. That reframe matters because it changes what you pay attention to and what decisions you make going forward. One honest limitation before we continue. This system works most effectively in soil with at least some existing biological activity and moderate moisture. Bone dry, heavily compacted clay that has been chemically treated for years may show slower initial results, sometimes taking a full growing season before earthworm populations establish at depth. This is not a failure of the method. It is a reflection of how deeply damaged some soils are and why starting early matters. Now that you understand exactly why this works, let's build it. You need 3 to 4 large plastic bottles, the kind that held soda, water, or milk. Anything with a volume of at least 1.5 liters. The larger the bottle, the larger the air chamber, and the stronger the passive pressure differential you create. Remove the cap and set it aside permanently. You will not need it again. Cut cleanly across the base of each bottle, removing the entire bottom. What you now have is an open tube, wide at one end, narrow at the neck. Exactly the geometry Bernoulli's principle requires to function. Choose your placement before you dig. For an established tree or large shrub, position 3 bottles in a triangle around the drip line, the outer edge of the canopy, where feeder roots are most active, spacing them roughly 18 to 24 inches apart from each other. For a raised bed or vegetable garden, a single line of bottles spaced every 16 inches along the length of the bed will influence the entire root zone beneath it. For a potted plant showing signs of root stress, 1 bottle inserted at a 45-degree angle into the largest pot you have will create meaningful air movement through the root ball within days. Dig each hole deep enough that when the bottle is inserted base down and upside down, the shoulder of the bottle sits level with the soil surface, and only the neck protrudes 1 to 2 inches above ground. That exposed neck is your chimney opening, the narrow aperture that wind crosses to generate the pressure drop below. Pack soil firmly around the outside of each bottle so no air bypasses the system through gaps at the surface. The system only works if the chimney effect is a primary path for air movement, not a side option among many leaks. Once installed, drop a small handful of organic material directly into each bottle through the exposed neck. Coffee grounds work exceptionally well because their particle size allows slow decomposition, and their nitrogen content is highly attractive to earthworms. Banana peel torn into small pieces, crushed dried leaves, or diluted compost tea, poured slowly down the neck, all serve the same function. Refresh this organic material every 3 to 4 weeks, which also gives you a regular reminder to observe what is happening around your installation points. Within 2 to 3 weeks, in biologically active soil, you will notice earthworm castings appearing at the surface near each bottle. That is your confirmation that the biological drilling mechanism has activated at depth. Within 1 full growing season, probe the soil 8 inches down beside an installation point and compare it to an untreated area of the same bed. The difference in soil texture and resistance will be the only data you need. This costs nothing. It requires no ongoing purchases, and it outperforms every liquid clay breaker product on the market, the ones drawing from that $8.5 billion industry, in long-term structural soil improvement, because those products treat symptoms, while this system rebuilds the underlying condition entirely. If you made it this far, you already know something that most gardeners will spend hundreds of dollars this season trying to buy their way into understanding. The $8.5 billion soil amendment industry does not want this video to be the first result when someone searches for clay soil problems. They want their aerator machines, their liquid conditioners, their seasonal treatment programs to be what you find first. Every time you share this video with someone whose garden is struggling, you are directly cutting into the marketing reach of an industry built on the assumption that you need to purchase solutions to problems that physics and biology have already solved for free. Leave a comment telling me how deep your clay layer runs and what you're growing above it. I read every single one. And the patterns in those comments shape what gets investigated next on this channel. Because the next video is going to go somewhere even the organic gardening community hasn't looked yet. The hidden reason why the water you're using to save your plants might be the silent thing slowly killing them instead. If this story changed how you look at the hidden world beneath your garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the history and science that they have tried to bury. Let's cultivate a better future together. The next treasure of knowledge will be opened soon.